22nd, 1941, 3:15 a.m. 3 million men stand poised along a 2,900-kilometer front. In the darkness before dawn, they wait for a signal that will unleash the most devastating military operation in human history. This is Operation Barbarossa, Adolf Hitler's supreme gamble, his attempt to conquer the Soviet Union in a single decisive campaign. What drives a man to believe he can conquer a nation of 170 million people spanning 11 time zones? What makes him think he can succeed where Napoleon failed? The answer lies not in military strategy alone, but in the dangerous intersection of ideology, hubris, and a fundamental misreading of one's enemy. This is the story of how the largest military invasion ever assembled became the graveyard of the Third Reich. It's a tale of initial triumph turned to catastrophic defeat, of how certainty became delusion, and how one man's gamble changed the course of world. In the summer of 1940, Hitler stood at the pinnacle of his power. France had fallen in just 6 weeks. The British were isolated, clinging to their island. Most of continental Europe was either conquered, allied, or cowed into submission. Yet instead of consolidating these gains, Hitler turned his gaze eastward. To understand why Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, we must understand the man himself. For Hitler, this wasn't just another military campaign. It was his life's purpose, the culmination of everything he had written about in Mein Kampf 15 years earlier. We stop the endless German movement to the south and west and turn our gaze toward the land in the east. The conquest of the Soviet Union would provide Lebensraum, living space for the German people. It would secure the agricultural resources of Ukraine, the oil fields of the Caucasus, and eliminate what Hitler saw as the Jewish Bolshevik menace forever. But there was also cold calculation behind the madness. Hitler knew time was not on his side. The United States was gradually awakening to the Nazi threat. The Soviet Union was modernizing its military at an alarming rate. If he waited, his enemies would only grow stronger. General Franz Halder, chief of the German General Staff, recorded Hitler's words. "We have only to kick in the door and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." This supreme confidence was shared by German intelligence, which grossly underestimated Soviet strength. They calculated the Red Army had 200 divisions. In reality, it had 360. They believed Soviet equipment was obsolete. They hadn't discovered the existence of the T-34 tank, soon to become the finest tank of the war. At 3:15 a.m. on June 22, 1941, 7,000 artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously along the entire front. The earth itself seemed to shake. Operation Barbarossa had begun. The invasion force was staggering in its scale. 3.8 million Axis troops, 600,000 motor vehicles, 750,000 horses, 3,350 tanks, and 2,770 aircraft. It was organized into 3 massive army groups. North aimed at Leningrad, center driving toward Moscow, and south targeting Ukraine and the oil-rich Caucasus. The initial success was beyond even German expectations. Soviet forces, caught completely unprepared despite numerous warnings, crumbled before the onslaught. In the first day alone, the Luftwaffe destroyed 1,200 Soviet aircraft, most still on the ground. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, the master of Blitzkrieg, led his 2nd Panzer Group in a lightning thrust that covered 270 miles in the first week. The surprise was complete, he wrote. Along our entire front, bridge after bridge was captured intact. The numbers were staggering. Within 3 weeks, Army Group Center had encircled 600,000 Soviet troops near Minsk and Smolensk. By September, the Kiev encirclement netted another 665,000 prisoners. By October, the Vyazma-Bryansk pockets yielded 673,000 more. A German officer wrote home, "The Russian Colossus has been struck down and will never rise again." Hitler himself declared, "The enemy is broken and will never regain his strength." In Moscow, Joseph Stalin refused to believe the reports flooding in. Despite 84 separate warnings of the impending invasion, from British intelligence, from his own spies, even from German deserters, Stalin had convinced himself Hitler wouldn't risk a two-front war. When the invasion began, Stalin suffered what amounted to a nervous breakdown. For 10 crucial days, he retreated to his dacha, leaving the Soviet Union essentially leaderless as disaster unfolded. "Lenin left us a great inheritance, and we, his heirs, have fucked it all up," he muttered to his inner circle. But Stalin's paralysis wouldn't last. When delegation from the Politburo arrived at his dacha, he initially thought they had come to arrest him. Instead, they begged him to return and lead. On July 3rd, Stalin finally addressed the nation by radio. His words were simple but powerful. "Brothers and sisters, our motherland is in grave danger."
What followed was perhaps the most remarkable mobilization in human history. Entire factories were dismantled and moved east beyond the Ural Mountains. 2,593 industrial enterprises in total, transported on 1.5 million railway wagons. Workers labored in sub-zero temperatures to reassemble these factories, sometimes beginning production before the roofs were even built. By late July, despite spectacular victories, disturbing signs emerged for the Germans. They had already suffered 400,000 casualties, more than in all their previous campaigns combined. The distances were vast, the roads terrible, and Soviet resistance, though chaotic, was fiercer than expected. A German soldier wrote, "The Russians fight with a stubbornness we have never encountered. They don't surrender even when surrounded. We have to kill every last one." More troubling was the arithmetic of attrition. For every Soviet division destroyed, another seemed to appear. By August, German intelligence had identified 360 Soviet divisions, and that number kept growing. Where were all these troops coming from? The answer lay in Stalin's secret reserves from Siberia and in the Soviet Union's vast population. While Germany could mobilize perhaps 10% of its population for military service, the Soviet Union could mobilize 15 to 20%. The Germans were winning every battle, but slowly losing the mathematical war. In August 1941, Hitler made a decision that many historians consider the turning point of the war. With Army Group Center just 200 miles from Moscow, he ordered Guderian's panzers to turn south to assist in capturing Ukraine. His generals were aghast. "Moscow is not merely the capital," argued General Fedor von Bock. "It is the railway hub, the political center, the symbol. Take Moscow and the Soviet Union falls." But Hitler was mesmerized by economics. Ukraine was the Soviet Union's breadbasket. The Donbass region produced coal and steel. The Caucasus held oil. "My generals understand nothing of economics," he sneered. The diversion succeeded tactically. The Kiev encirclement was the largest in military history, but it cost 6 crucial weeks. When the drive on Moscow resumed in October, something had changed. The leaves were turning, the rains were beginning, and ahead lay the Russian winter.
October 1941. The German offensive toward Moscow, codenamed Operation Typhoon, began with typical success. Another 673,000 Soviet troops were encircled at Vyazma and Bryansk. The road to Moscow seemed open. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels told the German people,
The great hour has struck. The enemy is beaten and will never rise again. But then came the Rasputitsa, the season of mud. Autumn rains turned roads into quagmires. Tanks sank up to their turrets. Horses drowned in mud. The German advance slowed to a crawl. Supply trucks took days to cover distances that should have taken hours. Then, in November, winter arrived with shocking ferocity. Temperatures plummeted to minus 40 degrees Celsius. German troops, told the campaign would be over before winter, lacked proper clothing. Weapons froze. Tank engines had to be kept running constantly, or they would never start again. Frostbite casualties exceeded combat casualties. A German soldier wrote, "The cold is beyond description. We wrap ourselves in anything we can find. Tablecloths, curtains torn from Russian homes, newspapers stuffed in our boots. But nothing helps. Men are dying simply from the cold." Meanwhile, fresh Siberian divisions, equipped and trained for winter warfare, began arriving at the front. These troops, released from the Far East after intelligence confirmed Japan would attack America, not the Soviet Union, would prove decisive. By December 2, 1941, lead elements of the 2nd Panzer Division could see the spires of the Kremlin through their binoculars. They were just 12 miles from Moscow's center. This was the closest the Wehrmacht would ever come to capturing the Soviet capital. But they could go no further. The Germans had reached the end of their strength. They had suffered almost 1 million casualties. Their supply lines stretched over 1,000 miles. Most units were at 35% strength. Army Group Center was a spent force. Then, on December 5th, the Soviets counterattacked. Led by General Georgy Zhukov, Stalin's troubleshooter, who had already saved Leningrad, the Red Army launched a massive offensive with fresh troops, including those Siberian divisions. The German front crumbled. For the first time in the war, Wehrmacht units fled in panic. Hitler, furious, fired dozens of generals, including Guderian and Bach. He issued his infamous no retreat order. The troops must defend themselves where they stand. This order, born of desperation, actually saved Army Group Center from complete destruction. By holding strong points rather than retreating, the Germans created islands of resistance that broke up the Soviet offensive. But the psychological damage was done. The myth of German invincibility was shattered.
Operation Barbarossa had failed. What was planned as a 3 to 4 month campaign had become an endless war of attrition, exactly what Germany couldn't afford. The quick victory Hitler needed had eluded him, and now he faced what he had always feared, a prolonged two-front war. The statistics tell the story of catastrophe. By April 1942, the Germans had suffered 1.1 million casualties, 35% of their entire force. They had lost 3,500 tanks, 3,000 aircraft. Most devastating were the losses among junior officers and NCOs, the backbone of the Wehrmacht's tactical superiority. The Soviet losses were even staggering: 3.3 million military casualties, 3 million prisoners, most of whom would die in captivity, perhaps 7 million civilian deaths. Entire regions were devastated. But unlike Germany, the Soviet Union could absorb such losses. It had the population, the space, and increasingly the industrial capacity to continue the fight. Why did Barbarossa fail? The simple answer is that Hitler and his generals fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the Soviet Union and the war they were fighting. They underestimated Soviet resilience. They assumed that initial defeats would cause the Soviet system to collapse, as Tsarist Russia had collapsed in 1917. They didn't understand that Stalin's brutal regime, for all its horrors, had created a state capable of mobilizing resources on an unprecedented scale. They underestimated the space. The Soviet Union was simply too vast to conquer in a single campaign. Every mile the Germans advanced stretched their supply lines and weakened their striking power. The
Wehrmacht was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. They underestimated the weather, not just winter, though that was bad enough, but the spring and autumn mud, the vast distances, the poor roads. Russia's very geography became Stalin's ally. Most fatally, they underestimated their enemy's will to fight. Nazi ideology portrayed Slavs as subhuman, incapable of serious resistance. This racist delusion blinded them to the reality that they were invading a homeland, and people will fight with desperate courage to defend their homes.
Operation Barbarossa was more than a military defeat. It was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. From June 22, 1941 onward, 75 to 80% of German military strength would be tied down on the Eastern Front. This was where the Third Reich would bleed to death. The invasion also transformed the Soviet Union from Hitler's quasi-ally into his implacable enemy. It brought the Soviet Union into alliance with Britain and America, creating the coalition that would ultimately destroy Nazi Germany. Perhaps most significantly, Barbarossa exposed the fatal flaw at the heart of Hitler's regime: the belief that will alone could overcome material reality. Hitler believed that German racial superiority and fanatical determination could defeat any enemy. But wars are won by mathematics, by who can produce more tanks, more planes, more divisions. And in that arithmetic, Germany was always going to lose. A German general, reflecting after the war, put it simply: we defeated ourselves. We believed our own propaganda about German superiority and Soviet weakness. We attempted the impossible and paid the price. The failure of Operation Barbarossa offers timeless lessons about the dangers of hubris, the importance of understanding your enemy, and the limits of military power. It reminds us that the greatest disasters often come not from weakness, but from overconfidence. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union not because he had to, but because he thought he could. He had defeated everyone else, why not Stalin too? It teaches us that in war, logistics matter more than tactics, geography more than ideology, and arithmetic more than courage. The Wehrmacht was perhaps the finest military instrument of its time, but it was asked to do the impossible. Most importantly, it shows us that people defending their homeland possess a power that no invader can match. The same Russian soil that swallowed Napoleon's Grande Armée and Hitler's Wehrmacht stands as an eternal reminder. Some gambles are too great, some ambitions too vast, and some enemies too resilient to defeat. Operation Barbarossa was Hitler's greatest gamble, and its failure was Nazi Germany's death sentence. In trying to conquer the Soviet Union, Hitler didn't just lose a campaign, he lost everything. The master of Europe became the architect of his own destruction, and the 1,000-year Reich lasted just 12 years, buried in the endless snows of Russia.